Leafs trade talks are really starting to escalate as a new report has dropped revealing a huge Leafs trade update, and it's surrounding the second and third line centers. We're going to write down the report and discuss the target that the Leafs are linked to as it may surprise you. Stay tuned for all that in this episode. Before we get into it, we are proud to announce this video is brought to you by Rentals.ca, who are proud supporters of Team Canada. And while they've been supporting our national team defend their home court in international competition, they've also been helping thousands of Canadians find their home floor all across the country. And it doesn't matter what city you're in, whether it is Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, Halifax, Winnipeg, Mississauga, Edmonton, Victoria, St. John's, from coast to coast, Rentals.ca has a ton of options to find the perfect place and price for you.
Their website is clean and easy to use, and you can pinpoint exactly on the map where you want to move, finding all the options in your area. Find your home court with rentals.ca.
Yeah, check out the link in the pinned comment in the description down below. And thank you once again to Rentals.ca for supporting us, supporting Team Canada, and supporting you guys in finding the best rentals across the country. Darius, there's a lot to go over today, but again, thank you to Rentals.ca for sponsoring this video. The Leafs coming off of a big win. They don't play till Wednesday now, and reports are starting to circulate. They're starting to swirl because the Leafs are in a very interesting spot. We obviously saw Nick Robertson step up a little bit, and he is the primary trade piece for the Toronto Maple Leafs as the trade deadline approaches, but even as moves start to go down before the trade deadline. And there's been some rumors and some reports surrounding a familiar face, but we're going to dive into a bunch of different things here. But let's start with this. So you can see here, the Maple Leafs have been exploring options for a second-line center, initially aiming for a third-line center. However, with the emergence of Fraser Minton, that need is taking a bit of a back seat. In a perfect world, they would like to acquire a second-line center, but it's unclear if they have enough assets to make a deal happen here. Now, we know how good John Tavares has been playing. This is kind of factored into it a little bit here, but I want to get your thoughts on this first. It seems like now they might even be pushing for a higher, a better player, a higher chip on the trade market. But again, they would probably, in all likelihood, need to get rid of a higher prospect. A guy like, I'm not going to say Easton Cowan necessarily, but depending on who they're going for here and a higher pick, I wonder if the reports are starting to come out that the Leafs may be striving for a much better player than we initially thought.
This report kind of caught me by surprise. I'm not going to lie, because I don't think the Leafs need a second line center at this point in time. I think they need actually a third line center. And obviously, like David Pognotta just mentioned there, that Fraser Minton has come up from the Marlies and he's looked pretty good, but I don't know if he's looked, to this point in time, again, getting scratched yesterday and had a kind of a poor performance against Detroit on Saturday. At this point in time, I don't know if he's long for the NHL or a full-time NHLer this year. I think that the plan probably still at this point is to go back down to the Marlies and continue to develop so he can be an impact player at the NHL level. So I think that they're actually targeting a third line center more so, I think, at this point. And again, there was conflicting reports. We also have a report from Darren Dreger, who I would tend to believe with a bunch of Leaf stuff that doesn't revolve around Mitch Marner so far this season. He does get a lot right. So I do think that there is something to that as well, because making a trade for a second line center in the middle of the season would be very difficult. And not only that, John Tavares has been playing very good so far this year. I mean, I thought that this year was going to look something similar to maybe last year, and he was going to continue to regress because that's what happens. And it's the tail end of this contract. We knew that it wasn't going to age very nicely, but it has at this point. He's had a great year. And yes, it's a contract year and he's fighting for a contract, but he's had a great season, and the foot speed has always been an issue for me, for everybody who's watched John Tavares. But everything else about his game so far this season, the scoring, I mean, he has 14 goals on the year this year. He's been fantastic. Making plays, the defensive responsibilities, he's been great at that. Face-offs, one of the best in the league. So he is still, I think, a great option for them at second line center, especially what he's been doing this year. So I think their focus should actually be turned towards a third line center. But that being said, there's still some interesting targets out there we're going to get into.
Yeah, Tavares spoke out and he said, I'm just playing. I think I got a lot of belief in my game and what I can do. And he's been playing unbelievable. He's probably the best player on the Leafs, or the biggest surprise thus far this season. A lot of fans out there thought he was going to get 60 points, maybe even like 50 points, regress from his 65-point year last season, which was still solid. But I want to get into some things here. So there's a bunch of different reports that are starting to swirl, starting to fly. Darren Dreger came out and said, I suspect Brad Treliving will work hard to acquire a third-line center, which would line up more with what you're thinking and what we initially thought in those initial reports, even though, again, David Pagnotta comes out and says second-line center. However, James Myrtle on Sportsnet 590 came out and said, I don't think the Ryan O'Reilly thing is 100% impossible. The front office still loves him. And that's when the conversation kind of shifts now to Ryan O'Reilly, former Maple Leaf. We know what he said about the core four and his thoughts on the core four. And The Athletic dropped some trade targets according to their insight and what they're thinking. And they also dropped two former Leafs, Nazem Kadri, who we'll probably have a video on, but we also have made videos on the past here, and Ryan O'Reilly. So a bunch of different rumors are starting to circulate surrounding Ryan O'Reilly here, and he's still a very solid player. Again, we know how he feels about Toronto. He did not think they were serious enough. That being said, they have a new coach. The core four is still intact, but I think a Ryan O'Reilly reunion, and we've seen it in our streams there, some fans really want it, some fans don't. It would be extremely interesting to say the least, but at the end of the day, he's a very good player.
If the Nashville Predators continue to lose, I see Ryan O'Reilly being traded this year, whether it's to the Leafs or another team. I see that happening because of the salary that he makes. Another team can absolutely take that on, especially if there's retained salary. And he's a great player still. He's not a first line center where he's playing, in Nashville, but he can be maybe a second line center. He can be a great third line center. And he hasn't had the greatest season, as you can see here, only 17 points in 28 games. But Nashville is one of the worst teams in the league. I don't think, many people foresaw that coming, but hasn't been good. Plays in a bunch of situations. We've seen him play with the Toronto Maple Leafs and obviously this core before. And the problem there and why he left is I believe he didn't like the core four. And I believe that he thought that the deployment of the core four versus everyone else on the team was a problem. There was too much emphasis on the core four, not enough about the whole team. And you need an entire team effort, and everyone needs to have roles to be able to win a Stanley Cup. And when he was on the team, they won a playoff round. Like, it worked well. I don't know if Sheldon Keefe knew exactly how to use him, but it worked well. But now there's a new coach, there's a new mentality. We're seeing that some of the players like Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner are playing a little bit differently. I wonder if he'd be more open to coming here. And the coach is the guy that he won a Stanley Cup with in 2019 as well. So that helps, I think. But it's an interesting thought to see, maybe him returning to the Leafs as a third line center. Like, it would certainly help. I wonder if he'd be open to it because, again, if he's closed off to the idea, don't acquire a guy who doesn't really want to play here in the system with these players. But if he would be open to it again, then I think he was fantastic the last time, and it sounded like he had a problem with a couple things. So that's the only reason he didn't re-sign in Toronto. But I do think whether it's to the Leafs or another team, Ryan O'Reilly may get traded at some point this season from the Nashville Predators. It hasn't been good there.
Yeah, and he's looking at his stats, 17 points, 28 games, still solid. He's about to turn 34 years old. When you compare him to John Tavares, who is 34 years old, similar age, 28 points in 30 games, like, Tavares would be great. But having this as, your second line and then third line center would be something that I think a lot of Leafs fans would be pretty fired up about, and I think it would make some sense. But again, if he doesn't want to come to Toronto, if he still has those reservations about the core four and about how the team is run, then keep him out. Don't give up assets for him. There are some other trade buzz and rumors going around surrounding the Leafs and the Kraken. Yanni Gourde, Brandon Tanev, Will Borgen. So, again, there's a lot of different things that are circulating surrounding the Leafs, and a lot of that is because they are active in the trade market. They're trying to acquire whether it's a third or second line center. I think probably going to end up getting a third line center, but that being said, you could also see them adding a depth forward, someone to help, not even depth, a good forward even at this point, depending on how Brad Treliving goes. But we do know that he's not known for buying a ton of players and spending a lot of their assets at the trade deadline. He prefers to build in the offseason. But let us know down below what your thoughts are on all of that. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest trade news as well as Maple Leafs news in general. And thanks again to Rentals.ca once again for sponsoring this video. See you guys later.